I'm going to turn it over now to Professor Hong.
Okay, so may I share my slides?
Yes.
I'll change it to full screen. Can you see the slides? Thank you. So actually, I'm in another domestic conference, so I prepared for a video clip as a backup, but I think I can do it online. So let's just go through the slides. So congratulations on Professor Liu's work and all the experts. And this is just a very preliminary project. The goal of this presentation would be introducing our project, and I'd like to ask any comments or advices on how to detect rare diseases using APAC CDM. So the name of our project would be Rare Endocrine Disease Common Data Model. We named it RED CDM. And the study was supported by Korea Health Industry Development Institute. So the background is we encounter patients with endocrine disease, rare endocrine disease with common phenotypes like short stature or multiple fragility fractures, as in osteoporotic patients. But the prevalence of this rare disease can be defined as under 1 per 2,000 as instance, or as domestic prevalence under 20,000, and the detailed criteria includes possible independent diagnosis with consideration of considerable burden and medical treatment and monitoring severity of the diseases. So the characteristics of rare diseases is consuming heavy medical resources with low profit, not like dyslipidemia, not like heart diseases. It requires intervention from public sector with puncture data set. So these patients usually require long-term monitoring and treatment in a lifelong phase. And the patients with short stature has been diagnosed with pseudohypoparathyroidism type 1B with osteosarcoma, or the 60-year-old female with multiple fragility fracture turned out to be X-linked hypophosphatemic rickets, not just simple osteoporosis. Once correctly diagnosed, these patients can be treated with, in some cases, with a simple medication or very widely available medication. Like in this male case, we used active vitamin D calcitriol, which is really common and cheap medication, but in this case, it is really effective once diagnosed correctly. And for this woman, we use oral phosphate like and supplements, and this is really effective in improving her condition, not like any other osteoporotic medications. So the correct diagnosis would be really important in the course of these patients. But the tragedy is, after in several reports, 7.6 years of diagnostic odyssey to just find wrong diagnosis in 40% in this patient. So this is the problematic situation, partly due to the lack of information, and limited information could be overcome by some claim database or registry-based approach as traditional studies, but these data have limitation like very shallow information, or sometimes these rare endocrine diseases, in order to capture the characteristics of these diseases, we require multidimensional structured, unstructured, multi-center biochemical image or genomic data set. So obviously, traditional approaches provided valuable information, however, it has own limitations. So in Europe or US, they also use similar approaches, but the multi-center registry model had its own limitation, like risk of raw data leaking, privacy problem, hard to update periodically, or limited extendability. Once it's constructed, it's hard to update regularly without the effort of many people. So multi-center network-based registers have similar limitations, also useful. So in Korean government recently focused on real-world evidence, not just on randomized clinical trials, but looking at multi-center studies, multi-center data records to capture the characteristics and information about this rare endocrine disorder patients. So they gave us this grant to our team. So we focused on a common data model as a suitable core model for a multi-center rare endocrine disease research platform 2 years ago, and we're now understanding we were right about this decision, but the technical and many other problems still exist. So the aim of this project was to construct CDM-based open rare endocrine disease platform to facilitate disease research and policy development. And this is a proof of concept study because many experts advise us not to do rare endocrine disease in AMAP CDM or common data model platform because it is somewhat hard to capture this rare endocrine disease by current data structure. I'll go with that later. So for the first target, we focused on 4 diseases which can be linked to National Claim Database with Carrier Network Platform of Korea. So the goal target diseases were medullary thyroid carcinoma, hypoparathyroidism, which is not surgical hypoparathyroidism, and pheochromocytoma paraganglioma, and hypophosphatemia without secondary etiologies. So the strategy was targeting each rare disease by diagnosis cause, then process phenotyping using further constraints. Because the operation, how we define this phenotype was the core problem of this project, and I'll comment later. After we learned AMAP CDM structure, and then we tried to map the data set of Severance Hospital, which I'm working in, from 2005 to 2018, and we are now almost done with this mapping project. So we extracted in a patient number, roughly 26,000 patients with potential diagnosed cause for rare endocrine disorders are listed above for diseases, about 70 million records, which is not very huge data set, but each individual have intense data record that could be characteristics of endocrine disease. And we follow the mapping rule from the OHDSI community. And now we're the end of the ETL transform stage. So, for example, when we look into the hypoparathyroidism cohort, after excluding those who received, the beginning could be the diagnosis cause, of course, so hypoparathyroidism, but hypoparathyroidism diagnosis would contain surgical hypoparathyroidism and other radiation-induced hypoparathyroidism. That is certainly not our target. So we need to exclude these patients from the mother cohort. After applying these constraints, we defined the phenotype. We collected 126 patients from this large database. So this is rare endocrine disease. So we can see the baseline demographics. And first we for the multi-center study extension, we aim to focus on how many patients were newly diagnosed per year. That could be a really good point to set up the cohort. Even this data set is this information really important for us because we can give it to multinational pharmaceutical companies or other surveillance company that we can share, and then how many patients in Korea are available would be really important key issues for these companies. So these are mock table for our short-term goal to count how many patients per year for the multi-center studies, and then compare it with the National Claim Database. How many patients can we capture by this study consortium? So after gathering this, constructing this cohort, hopefully, the potential for further studies could be studying their prognosis and the risk factors, which cannot be performed in a single center unit because of the lack of number, which is a characteristics of rare disorders. So with the multi-center approaches using CDM, we can apply much more informative approaches using this tool. But the problem is, how can we ensure that we captured right patients cohort with and rare endocrine diseases? For example, medullary thyroid carcinoma is not defined in ICD-10 codes. So some institutions use ICD-10 based data set structure, and Severance Hospital, our hospital, has local term key for medullary thyroid carcinoma, which is lucky. So in that case, we can map the local term key to the SNOMED CT and OMAP concept. That is not problematic, but in some institutions using only ICD-10 codes, it was problematic. So when you applied ICD-10 based national claim database operational definition, the phenotype constraints, the performance of this operational definition in our data set was not very good, and we changed a little bit about the constraints, and it has been improved a lot, but has potential of overfitting for our institution. Whether this operational definition or phenotyping could work for other organizations need to be thoroughly evaluated before we go to further studies. And for example, hypophosphatemia, we captured 7 patients, 8 patients by the improved definition, reduced 3 patients from the previous definition, but slightly increased the sensitivity. But these number changes, just 1 or 2 or 4 numbers of patients, means a lot for rare endocrine disease patients. This may not be problematic for hypertension, diabetes, or more common disease patients, but for hypophosphatemia or medullary thyroid carcinoma, 1 or 2 patients means a lot in terms of PPV or sensitivity. So that is our huge task for now. So we decided to use 2-track strategy for that. If institutions have local diagnosis codes for these rare endocrine diseases, then we can proceed with a pretty clear way with SNOMED CT operation definition anyway. But if institutions do not have local diagnosis codes and just have ICD-10 codes claim, then we'll proceed with ICD-10 based operational definition as modified form with the evaluation of the performance of this phenotype in various multiple institutions. For example, for pheochromocytoma and paraganglioma, when we approached with ICD-10 codes, it yields positive predictive value and sensitivity for 66%, 48%, but we can improve the at least positive predictive value up to 90%. Still, the sensitivity is not enough for the ideal. And then after defining the optimal operational definitions or phenotyping for these 4 diseases, the problem still remains, because when we compare the Yonsei Severance Hospital common data model and Aju, which Chen worked previously, common data model, we found that by the difference in definitions and even in the concept set, that the difference in number that we captured by using same operational definition differs significantly. So how can we harmonize these definitions and concept set in terms of rare endocrine disease still remains as a task for our study. But I think we can hopefully overcome by the end of this year with the harmonization of the definitions and concepts. We are working on that, and I'm really eager to share that results maybe a few months later. So the ongoing project is like that, and we're now targeting multi-center validation of the phenotype and operation definitions, and we want to build kind of a disease map linking to the Korean claim database. However, I'm not sure whether it is possible, but we're trying still hard. And the ultimate goal is just to help patients and adopt early interventions and pharmaceutical interventions with a more informative map of these patients, how many patients in Korea, how many patients are distributed somewhere. Then with that information, we can shorten the diagnosis and improve the treatment for these patients, and that's our goal. I would like really thank to Dr. Chen, who introduced this concept for me, and our teams, Dr. Lee, Dr. Chin-Gon Kim, who is the co-PI of this study, and we would like to thank for Korean Endocrine Society and Korean Health Industry Development Institute. Thank you for your attention, and I'd like to take any questions.
Thank you. That was a great presentation. I have a question before anybody asks that. I just want to ask a question. You said you had some pitfalls. Have you guys figured out what those pitfalls are, or why is there a discrepancy?
Oh yeah, the main pitfall, main discrepancy comes from, I think, from the data structure, because for rare endocrine diseases, as I mentioned, there's no coding for ICD codes for medullary thyroid carcinoma. It's just thyroid cancer. Medullary thyroid carcinoma is one of the subtype of the thyroid cancer. So usually you use C73 codes for the claim for the thyroid cancer in several institutes, and they do not have any local codes for describing medullary thyroid carcinoma. So that was the first problem that we faced, because our institution used local term for medullary thyroid carcinoma with map to C73 in ICD-10. There was no problem that we captured medullary thyroid carcinoma with a few constraints with medication or proper procedures. But for some institutions, just using thyroid cancer codes, there's no way to discriminate whether this cohort is medullary thyroid carcinoma patients or just accidentally ordered medullary thyroid carcinoma specific measurements or medication with another types of cancer. So that was unexpected situation when we start this journey, but we're figuring out anyway. So I'd like to ask you, how can you tackle this very messy problem, I think?
How do you tackle that? I mean, there's going to be a lot of, like you said, refining of the cohort, right? And the phenotyping definition. Now, I am not an expert in that. So I would leave that to the experts like you guys. But the other thing I would like to know is maybe, I don't know, all the other folks on here, what opinions you guys have or what other questions you have. But maybe another suggestion is to have you present at the Global OHDSI, because there are a lot more experts over there who can help you build the right phenotype.
Thank you. I love to do that.
Okay, let me get in touch with Craig over there and see when you can present at the OHDSI one. But that's going to be at midnight your time. So I apologize for that first off. It's midnight.
No
You know, it has been 2 a.m. Before. So
that is true. They moved it. They moved it.
They moved it.
Lucky.
Up a little bit more. Yeah, let me connect with the global folks, because the real experts who knows how to deal with all the different phenotypings and all the different scenarios and how to build a cohort where it has all of the nested statements in them. They're people like Mark Time, Christian, you know, Patrick, those guys, and Nicole and Chan on this call, but not me.
But thank you for giving the direction. So I'd love to participate in that meeting. Thank you.
Awesome. Anyone else have any questions?
So the another thing I'd like to point out is that, so even though we standardize the diagnosis and drugs based on ICD, usually based on ICD code system and drugs for drugs to RX norm, the laboratory values and each the concepts for laboratory measures has not been standardized in through our network yet. So if if calcium level of calcium or phosphate or vitamin D, those are really very basic lab tests, and these we do not have that official lab concept sets for that, or how we can capture those values across their network. So standardization usually sacrifices the granularity of your data. So you cannot help but sacrificing some of your granularity of your original data. But I do believe that we can standardize the laboratory values, especially for the basic lab, like 100 or 200 lab values, and that would be really helpful for like Ki-hong or other folks to who really want to have those values for their computational phenotyping.
Yeah, I strongly agree with Dr. Chan, because although we use different sets, different kits for the laboratory measurement, they have their own upper limits and lower limits, and we can standardize it as an maybe Z-score system or upper than 5 folds, 2 folds. So with that, at least we can sense whether these patients have lower level of some laboratories compared to the normal range. So that would be a clever way to capture these patients, and that would be really informative to define these patients as in real patients or not. Yeah, I strongly agree with that.
Amazing work. Any other question from anyone else? Everybody's having lunch, so they're tired. Well, I want to say thank you, Professor Hong, for joining us for the first time, and also Professor Liu for staying up so late to present to us on the Asia Pacific community call. I literally, while you guys were talking, did type to Craig to reach out to him, so I should be able to get an answer. If I do, then we will put you guys in touch with them. As a reminder, the next call is in 2 weeks, and during that call, we will be doing regional updates. So it's Q2, so let's see where all the different regions have gotten in the quarter and how well they've met their goals. Right, we got goals that we're supposed to be targeting, so let's see how let's look forward to everybody talking about their goals, and and we'll meet again in 2 weeks. All right, thank you.
Great. Bye. Thanks.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Good. I say good night, good day to all of you guys.
Night.
Night.
Okay, bye-bye.
Good night. Thank you. 谢谢。